Hey folks, Coach Patrick here, Endurance Nation. Welcome to another weekly broadcast. This is an opportunity for me to connect with you, the audience, to learn more about what you're interested in, what you want to train for, and also to share out some of our knowledge and experience as well. In this episode, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about taking your running off-road to the trails, the fun and excitement and fitness that will follow. And before I start, I did want to talk just very briefly for July, because this is July 2021. We are doing a fun habit challenge inside the team. If you go to endurancenation.us/habits, you'll learn all about it. You can sign up and get the free PDF book on habits and healthy habits you can create as an endurance athlete, and take part in the challenge as well. So do check that out. Whether you're part of the team or you're not part of the team, you should definitely, kind of get in there and see what it's all about. I definitely encourage people to kind of explore their concept of what normal is. And a huge part of that is really sort of understanding the little mechanisms that make you function as an athlete. And we have basically an array of habits that allow us to become successful, whether it's self-care, whether it's recovery, whether it's work, training consistency, nutrition, all sorts of elements of that. Even the habits we have sort of socially that allow us to train and make that construct a healthy part of our lives. These are all little tiny habits. Some of them are positive, some of them are not. And regardless of where they fall on the spectrum, some of them you want to change. And so this PDF book and the July challenge we have that accompanies it is kind of an opportunity for you to do just that. Super, totally free, low cost way to kind of get in, see if you can up your game by making some smart, small decisions that have long-term downstream impacts for you. So do check it out at endurancenation.us/habits. All right, awesome. So on to today's episode. Today, I'm talking about getting off-road with your running and off-road with your training and kind of get a better sense of what it means to be a more dynamic runner. As always, the comments are open here when I'm live on Wednesdays, so feel free to put your comments in there and I'll see them. I'll put them up on the screen. We can talk about them, particularly at the end, if you do have any questions related to taking your running off-road and sort of what it means generally for your fitness. Okay. And so off-road running is something that I think most athletes simply don't consider enough. When people think about being a runner, we have a vision or a shared story of what a runner is. And a runner is typically someone who's in a race, right? So like ancient times, runners were messengers. Before current modern times of iteration, runners were sort of more adventurers, sort of off the beaten path, people who just were not, quote unquote, normal. Now, in a strange, ironic twist, running is probably the most normal sport there is in the endurance spectrum, although some of our teammates, friends, colleagues, acquaintances are doing off the chart crazy things with their running, like our good teammate Gabe Peterson, who this weekend is doing running through Death Valley for sure, and trying to suffer through that crazy heat, as well as our another teammate Francis Picard up in Canada doing the Backyard Ultra Challenge. Running is as extreme as you want it to be. So I like to tell people all the time that running is simple, right? It's just simply one foot in front of the other. Put on some shoes, hopefully, definitely recommend the shoes, and run. Very simple. But is running easy? Well, that's really up to you. It's where you want to take it. It's how far you want to explore it. It's where you want to push your limits, whether it's up, whether it's far, whether it's in different conditions, different terrains, different continents, different competitive environments. It's all sort of up to you, and you can sort of move those dials as much as you want. In today's conversation, I want to talk a little bit about taking running off-road. Running off-road brings a new dynamic to running that most runners are simply not I would say, generally acquainted with, which is to say that running for most folks involves getting from point A to point B, or point A to B and then back again to A, in a certain amount of time or covering a certain amount of distance. Well, the minute we take running off the road and we put running on the trails, time and distance begin to take on different levels of meaning, simply because the difficulty and terrain associated with trail running really dictates what your pace, your speed, and the distance you're able to cover in a certain amount of time really are. And this is a challenging adaptation for people. And for those of you who are athletes looking to become better, trail running is a great way to develop adaptation, to develop fitness in a way that's not the same old, just run faster, do more repeats, run longer, do more runs. When we engage with trail running, we get to have a different level of engagement, right? So something for us to think about. So I'll pull this up. So the first thing I want to talk about in terms of the building blocks, which is intensity versus duration. And this is an important one simply because I believe that athletes overall think about running just like that, right? How fast am I running for this segment or for this event? And also how long am I running for? Is it going to take me 2 hours, 1 hour, 25 minutes? What is it going to look like? Well, intensity and duration are two levers to running fitness. And what trail running allows us to do is to ratchet up the intensity, but not have it be a function of just how hard you are running. Okay. So one of the challenges with using intensity as a lever for building fitness for runners is that running with intensity means running fast. And running fast brings with it, sort of on the limits of our running capacity, risk, right? Simply put, there's risk out there. So if you're running really, really fast, you're striding as long as you can, you're pushing as hard as you can, your run form starts to break down, you can only hold it for so long. And then we start to see little things start to happen, right? So running fast is when someone might pull a hamstring, right? Or maybe, tweak a calf. Running fast, requires significant recovery. And most athletes, not necessarily that into taking a day off after a hard track session, right? Hey, I'm a runner. I've got to get out there, got to log my workouts. And so running intensity can be a real problem. Moving to the trails allows us to do something different, because intensity isn't in terms of stress on your body. But you want to look at that from heart rate or power output if you're using a run power meter like Stride, is that intensity is now dictated by the terrain. So you could be running at a very easy pace for you, your normal zone 1 pace, happy all day. But because you're on a trail and it's a 10 to 15% grade, with some loose rocks in it, all of a sudden, that's a zone 4, zone 5 effort. You're still going at that easy pace, but it's much harder because of the terrain which you are covering. And so you have an opportunity with trail running to add the dimension of intensity into your training without the associated risk of what it means to run really fast and all out. So that's one. The other side of it is the duration piece. When we think about duration, athletes, generally speaking, kind of have a sense as a runner how far they can go in what time. You tell me I can run 2 hours, I can tell you I can run 14 miles pretty easily. I can do 7 miles in an hour. I can go do 14 miles. That's great. When we turn to the trails, that math starts to break down simply because of the terrain. So it's possible that while I may average 8.5-minute miles when I'm out running on the open road for an easy run, when I'm on the trails, that might be 10.5-minute miles, very different than who I am on the road. Simply because, again, the terrain, the challenges associated with it, both up and down, right? Because going down requires skill, and will also slow you down depending on the terrain and your expertise level and just your comfort level with going fast downhill. And so as a result, duration changes as well. So you can get a 2-hour run in, but you might only cover 6 miles. Now, that's great because we're looking for duration as a mechanism to add training stress to your body. But it is a struggle for runners who say, in 2 hours, I go this far. And there's this internal calibration that needs to take place when people move off road, because they say, I ran 2 hours. That's great. And they go back and look at their data and they say, I covered 7 miles. That's half of what I would normally go. That's not a good run. From a duration perspective, from an adventure perspective, from a fitness perspective, off the charts, super happy. But from that, old school, like, this is my habit, this is the little carrot I get, or the feeling I get, the sensation, the pride I get from being able to do this run and this speed, that's gone. And that's a difficult transition for people to handle. So trail running allows us to explore those opportunities and allows us to build that fitness that's really helpful, but it does intensity and duration in different ways, okay? Another element to running off-road, which I think is very valuable and people miss out on a lot here, is the second bullet point, which is the value of consistent, easy running. And this is really overlooked by a lot of runners. And you'll find that inside Endurance Nation, as we talk about run durability and run frequency. If you Google run durability in Endurance Nation or run frequency in Endurance Nation, you'll see them out there. Generally speaking, this is a protocol we baked into our programs probably back in 2016 now, going on 5+ years, where it became very clear to us that as athletes who are breaking down in the longer races, and by longer races, I mean not just the race duration, but also race time, we're really struggling with baseline running infrastructure, right? So even as we got them into training, many of them would simply break down in training just because they didn't have the physiological infrastructure, the strength, the resiliency to handle the training load required to be successful for the race. It was just too tight a timeline on the run side. So running consistently, running frequently makes a difference. And when you're running off-road, you're running on the trails, you can totally do that because you're simply adventuring, right? So you could run the same trail in two directions, totally different trail. You could find new trails or new areas to run in. It's a complete sensory experience, and it's not the same as just running, right? So all of a sudden it adds this other dimension of adventure, of fun, of exploring. You can get your regular run in, whether it's a 2 mile or a 3 mile, up to a 5 mile kind of easy run or run hike or run walk, depending on the terrain and the situation you're in. Running outside makes that type of run so much easier, especially when you get off on the trails. So if you do have access to trails, but let's say you're training for a marathon, you may not be doing all of your running on the trails for the marathon, maybe some of your recovery runs, but some of these easy runs during the week, the consistency runs, go to the trail, do some exploration, change the pace, change your stride length, get engaged differently. It's a great way for you to build fitness, to maintain that run resiliency that you've built and keep yourself healthy as a runner, but also to avoid becoming stale mentally, that setback that really hurts you overall when we think about what it means to be successful and that desired end state of fitness and strength. Consistency is a huge part of that. It's not just those one-off workouts that we see or those epic sessions. It's also a function of that consistency. And so bring joy to your running by exploring the outdoors, and that can make a big difference as well. Okay. The third point I want to talk about is the three-dimensionality of off-road running. And this is really important. I think athletes do not appreciate, in general, just how one-dimensional we are as runners, like literally forward. And you could tell if you've been a runner for a while, because when your friends or your kids say, let's play some basketball, or let's kick a soccer ball around, or maybe some ultimate frisbee, and all of a sudden these sports are requiring lateral movements or backwards movements, you figure out very quickly, I don't really move that way very well. I can get there. I just have to turn myself around and then run forward, as opposed to being able to move laterally to the side, right? And as such, as a runner, yes, do you get better at running? For sure. But just with any mechanism, our body is lazy in the regards of prioritizing one activity and deprioritizing everything else. And so as adding trail running back into the mix, or off-road running, really forces you to move in different planes so you can get better at dynamic movement, dynamic stride length, cadence levels, at different speeds as well. And all of those different elements of variety make you a more complete and healthy runner. Anything you do, if you continue to do it over and over again, think about sort of the golden mean from Aristotle, can become a problem if you do it too much, right? So let's just say your doctor says, taking an aspirin every day will keep you healthy. No idea, but if that's what your doctor says, you say, I'm going to take 2 or 3 of those a day. I'm going to be super healthy. Probably not going to happen, right? If the doctor says, hey, eat vegetables, you'll be healthy. If you eat vegetables all the time and avoid all the other foods, not going to work out for you, right? The doctor says, hey, you need to get in 1 hour of exercise a day to be healthy, and you maximize that hour by crushing yourself in some high octane boot camp scenario. Probably not going to be the fitness that your doctor is looking for. Still an hour, but you've gone in a direction that's not super helpful. So when I think about what it means to bring three-dimensionality to your running, it's an opportunity for you to become a more dynamic athlete, to successfully and safely strain some of these muscles that perhaps have not been used for some time in a manner, at a speed, at a cadence that's very friendly, as opposed to going out and pretending you're in the NFL combine and trying to do the 40-meter dash and catch footballs and twist and turn and tackle, which is really going to hurt you down below the waist in terms of your ability to handle those lateral movements. We can do that on trails, gain a lot of the benefits that you might otherwise have to do some basic functional strength training for, and ultimately become a better runner. I think it's super helpful for runners, for example, who are planning for a marathon, to be able to run a hilly course, even if it's a shorter distance, because when they get to the marathon and it's tough at the end, they mentally can say, I've run something that's far worse than I see in front of me right now. I really thought it was going to be sort of a bad spot, but actually it's not nearly as bad as I had anticipated, simply because I've done this other work before. We have that sort of expectation setting benchmark. Similarly speaking, when you become when you begin to run and you run in dynamic planes of movement, you are starting to recruit different motor units, different muscles, which makes you a better, stronger runner overall. So adding trails actually not only makes you healthy from engaging in the different planes of movement, but it also recruits new motor units and allows you some diversity in training intensity and pace, which will ultimately make you a better runner, right? Okay, awesome. not the last one, second last one here, the pace changes for terrain. This is another interesting one that I think athletes, as I mentioned earlier, kind of struggle with the idea of the distance that they get. The pace changes for terrain are very different as well. Most runners will tell you, hey coach, I've got one speed. And like, this is my speed. You're telling me to do intervals? I got one speed. You're telling me to go slower? Guess what, coach? I've got one speed. And people end up running at that speed all the time, whether it's super easy or kind of, steady, but a little faster, or tempo pace. People put themselves into a groove. That, from a training perspective, is not great either. Corollary example will be simply like using dumbbells. If you have a set of 15-pound dumbbells and all you do is curls with those dumbbells and you do the same amount of reps every time, over time, your ability to curl those 15-pound dumbbells for 20 reps, let's say, gets better and better until finally it's easy and there's no more adaptation. So too is the same process when we think about using a specific pace or intensity as the lever for building fitness. Over time, your body adapts to that pace, that intensity, and no longer sees the benefits that it would get from an otherwise more diverse regimen. And so running on the trails automatically bakes in some of that diversity of training, simply because it gives you an opportunity to explore your fitness, from a terrain perspective, from an elevation perspective, from a dynamic running perspective, or sort of managing things for distance and also the nutrition piece. All of those elements come together to create a better runner from you, simply because you are engaged as a runner in multiple areas. And I think people who are typically used to that one dimensionality of running, they really not only are selling their total fitness short, but they're missing out on the elements that will actually make them a better runner when they do get back to the flat. So spending some time away, running on softer surfaces, doing some adventuring, doesn't mean that you're moving backwards or you're losing fitness on that normal run side. It just means that we focused our energy elsewhere, and that refocusing can be very beneficial to making you a better overall runner, both from a fitness perspective, but also a skill perspective as well. All right, awesome. And then our last one here that we have is avoiding the Strava segment trap. And this kind of thing happens all the time. And I put this here simply as an opportunity to talk about how, if we're not careful, we will fall prey to how some of the smartest minds of our generation have collaborated to get us to earn badges and to do things, to chase metrics that may or may not be aligned with our overall goals. And, that sort of Strava piece is a big part of it, where people are used to competing against their best time. They know what their best time is because it's always in the app. The runs are always compared to previous runs as well, so you can tell if you're doing better or worse. And the data, or the perspective of that data, for me, is really a challenge, simply because we may be doing something in terms of building your fitness that's not related in any way to last month's workouts. You're actually a better runner. You're doing more now than you would have done before. And folks aren't appreciative of that, simply because they're working their way through this process of chasing segments. And when that happens, you end up in sort of this vicious reinforcing cycle, where you're preparing for and training, racing for these segments, these intermediary or short-term milestones. And as a result, you're kind of losing sight of that big picture fitness piece. So when you head off-road, all of that's gone. Like, sure, there's FKTs, fastest known times, for big events, and that's a fun challenge to get to as you become more comfortable and more fit running off-road. But until we get to that point, you can leave those Strava segments behind and not be chasing an arbitrary, half mile from this telephone pole to that mailbox as a marker of your fitness or a test against the competition, simply based on the clock. Instead, good runners are always focused on making the steps that help the big picture element most of all, whether it's, beginning of the season, mid-season, or end of the season as we're more into the races. Better runners are really understanding in terms of, hey, the diversity of surfaces and areas in with which I can run will make me a better runner, simply because I'm recruiting different muscle units, learning new skills, working on my nutrition, and overall, I'm still running and getting healthier. So I hope this is helpful to you folks. I hope you are encouraged to go outside and go outdoors. The fastest way to do it, head over to your Strava feed. Find folks who live near you and just see where they run. If you're not finding anyone who does that off-road stuff, then head over to Strava, because you can find heat maps and discover areas where people do run in your area. Connect the dots, see the green stuff. You can download a GPX file to your watch or your training device. It'll actually kind of put out a breadcrumb that you can follow, or just plan your own route as well. But do yourself a favor, get outside of the traditional training, explore the outdoors, whether it's super, super up, super, super down, or just super, super adventure. It's going to benefit you as a runner for the variety and the consistency that it will bring. at the end of the day, the more you like what you do and the more often you do what you do, the better you're going to get at it. So let's get to work, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this broadcast. I'll see you next Wednesday, same time with a new topic. You can check it out on the events tab here on our Facebook page. Until then, I'm Coach Patrick from EnduranceNation.us signing off. Thanks so much for your support.